What is going on, my man Dave?
Dr. Joe, is that you? Oh my gosh, how are you doing? How are you doing, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
Most excellent, sir. Most excellent.
Well,
It's
very
another
good.
week for us to meet and do what we love.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, we want to welcome you all back. Or if this is your first time tuning in, thanks for tuning in to the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. Me and Dave, like you said, we enjoy doing this every week. We enjoy seeing one another and getting to kind of chat a little bit about things that's been going on the past week, and then also to provide you with a new topic to help you with your journey. So, with that, I want us to talk a little bit about planning and preparation. So, in our normal fashion, I'm going to go ahead and hand that off to Dave so he can go ahead and get us started.
Yeah, that's a good one, Joe. Planning and preparation. Let's see. We've talked about critical self-reflection. We've talked about
Yeah,
setting goals. We've talked about um, understanding a variety of different situations and environments. So this seems like a natural progression. We're backing up a little bit. And
right.
yeah, planning and preparation. That's a good one. So when I think about planning and preparation, it kind of integrates those topics and even goes a little bit deeper, even though it's kind of a higher level, broader topic. But it allows us to combine some of these things. So it's one thing to plan, but it's another thing to prepare. And you need to have a plan and prepare for that plan, whether it's education, whether it's experience, whether it's a
Right.
certification, whether it's networking, maybe it's personal development, maybe it's professional development, what have you. So, um, we think about our goals, we have a goal out there, but now how do we plan for that goal? I want to be a rocket scientist, or I want to go to the moon. Well, how do we start planning and preparing for that? And it can be a kind of a tough question to ask ourselves. We know what we want generally, and if we don't, well, that's a separate discussion. But let's say we do know what we want, and we have a goal out there. But how do we plan and prepare? And I would say, you have to do some industry research, maybe some geographic research if we're talking about
Right.
professional development, understanding the job market and understanding your value in that job market so you don't undervalue or over assess your value. And then from a personal development side of things, I would say, it gets back into that self-reflection, being honest with
Right.
ourselves and really understanding what it's going to take to do those things that interest us from a personal level. So I'm going to kick it off with some of that for food for thought and see what your thoughts are there, Joe.
Okay. You mentioned quite a few topics that we've already discussed, but the one I didn't hear you say was being intentional.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
that's a good
that
one. Yep.
also
Being
aligns,
intentional.
with planning and preparation.
Absolutely.
Like Dave said, we think about our goals, we think about where we want to go, but then we don't really get into the preparation or the planning stages. We have that goal. A lot of people put those on their dream boards or goal boards, whatever you want to call
Hmm.
them, and they place them there, but then they don't go any further. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's when the planning and preparation phase is really important. And like Dave said, you got to do the research, whether it's personal development, whether it's career transition, all those things. But there are a lot of things that go into moving to the next level. And so I think, again, tying in being intentional, I always think of it as that you're ready for the next thing. And you do that by preparation, by planning. Anything we do, an event, you don't just put the date on the calendar and then hope everything aligns and you get there. No, it takes a lot of planning, a lot of preparation to get you to that end state. And
Yeah.
again, it's no different than setting your goals and then defining what it's going to take to reach that goal. So that's when the planning and preparation is most important, because you're identifying what it's going to take you to get there. And
It's
so,
really about setting up your foundation when you think about
absolutely,
it,
yeah.
because in society, sometimes we think about, what's your idea? Okay, now start taking action. And we don't
Right.
really take the few moments or days or hours or whatever the time frame is to really think through and plan and prepare for that. And yes, it's a little bit more upfront work, but it's going to save you a lot of
Oh,
rework
oh,
and
absolutely. And
mistakes on the
I was
backside.
just going to jump in there. That's when you put together your A, your B, your C.
Right.
Because if you think things are going to happen, or if you think things are not going to happen, then you're sadly mistaken. So, that's all that planning and preparation piece. When you think about even my daughter, she's going to get married, and in the spring, early summer, and in most cases, weddings, people are planning those sometimes years in advance, just
Mhm.
because, again, you've got that goal, which is marriage or wedding. But how are you going to get there? What is it going to take to get you there? And
Yeah.
if you hear some of those young couples talk about, it's been a couple of years, but that's what it takes. Sometimes I couldn't imagine people saying, okay, we're going to get married next week. What are all the things we need to do? And that's almost like your career.
Hmm.
You want to get to the next level in your career. Say you're a first line supervisor, but you want to eventually be a manager or director. It's not going to happen overnight,
Yeah.
right? Without that planning and preparation, because at that next level, like Dave said at the very beginning, what type of research do I need to do to understand what it's going to take to do that job? So I may have to do some
Yeah.
industry research. I'll have to check my organization to see what type of skills that I need to be able to get to that next level. So it's all, having that goal in mind is just part of it. The
Hmm.
other piece of that is the planning and preparation to get you there.
But yeah, it's really the recipe for success. I mean, if you want to
Absolutely.
make a meal, do you just start throwing vegetables and meat into a dish and say, "Oh, there, it's done"? No, you
Right.
got to look up the recipe, figure out what it takes, maybe prepare the fruits and vegetables or the
Yep.
meats, and then plan out so you don't get done with one thing and it's sitting there being cold for an hour while you're finishing the preparation for the rest of the meal. So you have to have a plan going in. You have to do your research. And what does that recipe look like, as part of your plan for success or, for, you know, uh, personal development, getting a new hobby or learning a new language or, trying something new or on a professional side again. What is it going to take to advance you in your career? Maybe it's some management and leadership training, or maybe it's understanding how mentoring works, or
Right.
maybe it's just more industry knowledge within your industry or within your company. Maybe it's lateraling to get more experience in different areas so you
Right.
understand the big picture and how everything fits together. And we've mentioned this before, there's a need for very narrow understanding that's very deep, let's say, in finance or accounting, but then there's also the strategic generalist perspective that we've talked about, where understanding how each one, maybe you're not an expert in everything, but you have
Right.
the knowledge to understand how things integrate and how one department may affect another or multiple other departments. So having this understanding, understanding what that recipe looks like to help you is a big piece of that. And that recipe is, your research, whether it's for personal or professional.
Right. Dave, I think one of the I think the one commonalities between a lot of the things we talk about is, and we may not have said it in the past episodes, but the planning and preparation phase. Again,
Mhm.
it's that you said it, the recipe, the foundation of how you're going to get there. Even with the journey,
Mhm.
like you have a destination in mind, but it still takes that planning and preparation to get you
Yeah.
there. So I think you brought up all those topics that we've covered early on, but to achieve anything, you have to have something in place to help you get there. I
Yeah.
think it would be very difficult if you had a vision, of where you want to go, and then you try and keep it in your mind of how I'm going to get there. I think if you don't have it written down or in a
Right.
place where you can,
Refer
because
to it.
most cases you're going to have to adjust it
Mhm.
for the most part. Like mentioned before, having that plan A, B, C, or D, because we would like to think it's going to be a straight line. But in most cases, like me and Dave always talk about, sometimes you have to back up a step or go around an obstacle that gets in your way. So having
Mhm.
a plan in place, like you said, you can refer to be able to maybe have to change it a little bit, but you can still see the end state, even if you have to veer left or right to get there. But having that in place is very important. And I can remember back when I didn't have a plan or wasn't prepared for the next thing, and it hit me over and over again. And when I refer to my job situation where the company would move, they would not need us anymore. They were going a new direction, and I'm left with, okay, what do I do now? Because
Right.
there was no plan, there was no preparation because this hit me, blindsided me.
Mhm.
So, in that case, out of my control, but as it happened once or twice, then me and the wife really did start to think about, so if this happens again, what do we do? How do we
Sure.
approach this? And I think we got better at it. Not a good thing, but we
Right.
did learn from, those previous occasions or instances, and we were better able to, get over that, once it happened again. But initially, didn't have a plan.
Mhm.
Did not know. We were really flying by the seat of our pants because we didn't know what to expect. And so
Well,
I don't.
there are some circumstances where, kind of winging it or, flying by the seat of your pants is necessary. But to your point, we should have a plan,
Right,
and be prepared because, when we think about the pandemic, no one was really
right,
prepared for that.
absolutely. And
And it
and
caught a lot of,
how do you prepare for that though?
yeah,
That's one of those things. But
exactly. And
having some semblance of what you would like to achieve before all that, because if you're on a
right,
path already, this is one of those obstacles or barriers that gets in front of you that you have to figure out how to maneuver
sure.
around to still reach your goal. But
Yeah.
yeah, this one it's probably helped a lot of people in that regards, as far as starting to look at, what if something like
Themselves.
this happens
Yeah.
again,
Well,
how
and
do
that's one of
I.
the things about the pandemic that did occur. I mean, and I'm going to pause for a second. Another analogy might be your budget, your household budget. There's
Right,
planning and
right. Yeah,
preparation behind that for those of you who work with numbers or monetary values easier to understand. But when we look at the pandemic, we weren't prepared for it. We did have some
right,
knowledge, what might be coming, but as a whole, collectively, society kind of ignored it and kind of dismissed it until it actually hit home. And that's
right,
like a lot of things, a lot of people tend to, not pay a lot of attention to certain things until it affects them personally.
right,
And one of the positive things that did come out of the pandemic was, a lot of folks started doing some critical self-reflection and started to make plans for what does my future look like? What does my next step look like? Where do I want to be? Where do I see myself? Given this opportunity, whether it's positive or negative, it was still an opportunity to develop myself personally or professionally. And what does it look like to prepare for that? How do I prepare going forward in an industry or in society where things have been so significantly impacted? And some people used it to their advantage, to redirect their
right,
careers and find new avenues for advancement, or just saying, hey, fund meter's pegged, I'm done,
right,
see y'all later type thing. So, you know, planning and preparation is really underrated. Again, I'm going to go back to where, a lot of industries, especially Western culture in the United States, it's about, hey, here's a task, go get it done. And we just start running without really thinking about
right,
having a plan on what does it look like, what are those steps, what are the necessary steps to get to that end goal, what's that plan look like. If we go to sports, most sports entities don't just go into a game and wing it the entire game.
right,
They
right,
have plans, they have set moves, or strategic positioning, and put their personnel in certain areas to maximize the opportunity, versus just saying, hey, let's go out there and have fun, and whatever happens happens, which is
right,
one option if that's your goal, is
right,
to have fun. But if your goal is to win, maybe that might look a little bit different. Maybe there are some deliberate things you need to do. So,
Absolutely. I think in terms of, working for an organization years ago, that was the approach they took. They basically were always fighting fires because
mhm,
that was the approach they took. There was no planning. It was just, let's go put out this fire. And then, we'll ride it until another fire comes, and then we'll try to address it again
mhm,
versus, like you say, maybe taking a look at the data. Okay, this has happened 17 times, and
mhm,
and what are some of the steps that we took to resolve this issue? Well, let's write those down, and then
right.
we know that these are some of the things we can do next time to, or even prevent them. We
Yeah,
start
or
looking at
cataloging the things that worked well versus the things
absolutely,
that didn't work well.
absolutely. But
So
it's
to your
it
point, so you
amazed
don't make
me.
those mistakes again.
Absolutely, and that's where I was going. That, it amazes me that so many, even people or organizations, that we just, and I said it before, fly by the seat of our pants, and we continue to readdress the same thing over and over again
Mhm,
rather than being strategic, and being intentional about maybe looking at it and planning and preparing for it to happen. And you know, to the credit of the one organization I work for, that's what we started to do. We really
mhm,
started to looking at categorizing things, and looking at how we can prepare for it, because it's inevitable. It was going to happen again, but are
sure.
we going to be better prepared to handle the situation this time? And we became very good at, uh, you know, based on the data we had, we could approach it differently. And so we even got to the point where we could predict, and the preparation for us was being ready to react to it as soon as it occurred, versus
Mhm,
in previous cases and scenarios, we would go days, uh, trying to fight this situation where, once we got really good at it, we could narrow it down to a couple hours, and
yeah.
we could move forward. So that planning and, preparation phase was critical for the success of our organization and what we're trying to achieve. So
Yeah, and let's pull in the factor of time management as well,
yeah,
because you can, and I've experienced this with a company I worked at. They had a goal in mind and they just started running towards it. They had a time
right,
frame. It was very short. It was like a week, and they got it done. And it, instead of taking the extra few days to plan this out to get it done right, they made a decision, they ran with it, they got it done, but they had about 4 weeks of rework to fix a lot of the issues versus taking an extra day or two to plan out the steps so they wouldn't have the rework.
right,
And the go
right.
and the rationale behind that, good or bad or indifferent, was we established a date for our customers and we're going to meet it, by God, no matter what
Wow.
happens.
Okay. Yeah.
But doing that, they kind of, did themselves and their clients a disservice, because yeah, they did get that item out there, but the customer was not happy at all. Sure, you made the date, but if you would have given it to me a day or two later and it would have been what I wanted, I would have been
Right.
much happier and more satisfied versus being frustrated and creating a bunch of rework from all the calls that were coming in to fix this product.
Right.
So, there's a lot to be said about planning and preparation or knee-jerk decision making, and not doing your due diligence
Right.
within a particular area. And I can look at it from my doctoral program. My undergrad and grad were from the same institution, but when I wanted to get my doctorate degree, I wanted to be careful, and I'd considered, a couple of different types of degrees, or industry type degrees, and I settled on where I was, where I am now, and not settling in a bad form, but determining this is the degree and program I
Right.
wanted. But it did take some research to understand, what are the requirements for this type of degree? What are the requirements for that type of degree? What does the curriculum look like? What is the time? What does the acceptance level look like? Not from getting into that institution, but outside. What is it? How are they
Right.
recognized? What type of time commitment? Can I work or not work? If I can work, is it full-time or part-time? Those were all things I needed to think about and research before I really jumped into the deep end of this doctorate degree. And had I not done that, I might be in a totally different place under totally different circumstances that
Right.
I may or may not want to be in. So
No.
doing that preparation did save a lot of time on the backside, kind of like, I want to paint my house. So I'm just going to go out and buy some colors and just start painting rooms randomly.
Right.
What's the plan? Are those colors going to be cohesive? Is it going to lend to what I want? Or am I just going to paint everything white or black or, tan or whatever? So,
Right.
and then not be satisfied and then repaint 3 or 4 times till I find that color that I like.
Right.
So,
No, Dave, that's a good point you make in reference to the research preparation and all those things. Because I did a lot of the same things you did as far as selecting the school and all those factors that you talked about. You know, the reputation. Will I be able to go full time? I did. I considered
mhm,
all of those things, but the one thing I didn't consider long enough, I think, and I think this is a lot to do with me continuing without the gap,
mhm,
without full preparation, without full research. And it was because again, I was my goal was to get it done as fast as possible. And
right.
so I did have a little bit of a hiccup because of that. So like you said, you selected the made sure you're selecting uh the right curriculum, the area that you wanted to study. And I initially started in another field. And after a couple of classes, I realized, you know what? I think I'm going to switch up. And
Mhm.
that cost me a little bit of time, like you said, because I wasn't as complete with my planning and preparation phase. And so I ended up taking a few classes that I didn't need to take because
Yeah.
of that. So, and like I said, I know a lot of it is to do with my haste into immediately, with 1 month I graduated with my MBA, and then next month I was already enrolled in a doctoral program and moving. And
Mhm.
so, it took me a few months to realize, this is not really the path I want to go down. So, like I said, it cost me a little bit of time. Fortunate I caught it fast enough, even though it, probably still wasted time. But I couldn't imagine, getting down to a certain point or a certain level and have completed so much of it, and then all of a sudden say, "Oh, this is not really it." So I totally agree that it's very important to not to get to a point where you procrastinate and just push everything off, but that preparation and planning is important. So, like Dave said, on the back end, you're not recovering from making those early mistakes or not following your plan or even having a plan or prepare for what's next. So, I'm a perfect example of not doing the full planning and preparation in regards to my doctoral program. Now, yeah, so I got there, but like I said, I probably took a few extra steps that I may not have had to if I would have kind of took a little bit of time to really consider my options and did some more of that research, planning, and
And this
preparation.
really gets back to one of our favorite phrases, taking the long, painful, scenic route.
Absolutely,
That's what we
absolutely,
want you to prevent. That's what we want our viewers and listeners to prevent from happening. It's taking that
yeah,
long, painful, scenic route or that painful, long, scenic route, however order you want to put it in. Um, yeah, I mean, because what's going to happen is you're going to lose time, you're going to lose money, you're going to lose
yeah,
effort, you're
yeah.
going to lose energy that you could have redirected in a more efficient manner. Now, we always put up the argument there are pros and cons to taking the
Oh,
long, painful,
absolutely,
scenic
yeah,
route.
yeah,
From a qualitative perspective, it can be a much more robust experience. It's just how many scars do you want to battle scars you want to walk out of that war with, right? So, you know, pick and choose carefully. There are times where
right,
being expeditious it does take priority, but if you got the time or if you have the time or you can make the time or manage the time, do your research, plan and then prepare effectively because you're going to be surprised at how much you can save. We're not reinventing colleges and universities and industries. We're picking up where someone else has left off to build upon that. So we're not having to start over, not having to start from scratch. Again, pros and cons to each side, but
right,
understanding your situation, critical self-reflection
yeah,
is imperative to understanding what your goals are and then what do you need to do to plan and prepare to attain those goals, whether it's education, whether it's personal, professional, etc.
Right. So Dave, we are getting really close to our time. So I know you just did a really great summary. Anything else you want to add before we release our viewers and listeners and allow them to do something else with their day?
I think we've covered this topic pretty well. Yeah, I mean, it's everything, as we've mentioned before, these are not standalone topics.
Right.
We can start to address them as individual topics, but the reality of it is all of our podcasts are interwoven, and there's
Yeah.
bits and pieces that tie in. It's like a web or a network where you really can't just pick and choose one piece because
Right.
they're so heavily integrated. And I'll just leave our viewers with that.
And you actually stole some of my same thing, because I was going to say the same thing, that everything we talk about throughout our podcast are really interconnected. They really are. Like we mentioned at the very beginning, goal setting, being intentional, and just some of those other things that we've discussed to this point. But again, if you've not listened to those other podcasts or viewed those other podcasts, we really encourage you to go back, because like they said, they are interwoven. I mean, these are not standalone. These are, again, going to just help you to continue to build what tools you already have, and to maybe, again, help you not have that long scenic route. Like Dave said, though, there's something to be said about that too. But we would just like you to have as many tools and as much information as you
And the
can
positive experience
carry.
that you really want to have.
Right. Yeah. Because it still comes back to, your choice. And that's what we would like for you to just have enough information to make an informed decision. Kind of going back to what I just briefly said, if I would have taken a little bit longer, did a little more research, found out a little bit more information, then I might not have taken a couple of classes that I didn't need.
Mhm.
So, that's really what we're hoping to do, is help you with some of those decisions that you make, just providing you with more information that you can kind of, take a look at and evaluate for yourself. And with that, we both have kind of just jumped back in there, but we just want to thank you again for tuning in to this episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. And so if you are enjoying these podcasts, please leave us a comment. Please let us know if there's something you'd like to hear, or if there's somebody out there that might benefit from this information. Please share it. Again, we enjoy doing these. We enjoy, talking about these types of things. But if there's something you want to hear about, please let us know.
Yeah.
And with that, we want you to continue being your not so ordinary you.